Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this narration of the web series The Survivor Becomes a Dungeon. If you're new to the series, there is a playlist listed down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 19. Trisha, Teen Human Blacksmith Point of View. Hey, thanks for escorting me. I know I said I could handle this on my own, but I appreciate the company. The young woman glanced back at Isak and flashed a smile. It looked like Isak needed to get out of the camp after what happened a few hours ago. Luckily, nobody blames him outright for losing the little dwarf girl, but it is bothering him. Isak offered a half smile as he stretched the back of his head. No problem. Besides, the shepherd warned us that non-combatants shouldn't be traveling alone in the woods, despite it being Vidmori's territory. We're still visitors and trespassers here. It's better not to be alone, lest we come across some line. He explained simply enough, as his hand rested on the grip of his short sword. It's not like she wasn't there when the group meeting, but she wasn't exactly paying attention. She was just being honest. Right now, they were heading towards the mountain. She didn't intend to climb it, but she wanted to see if there was an opening near the base that they could get into. Remind me why you wanted to come here again, Isak asked, mainly wanting to fill the silence as he looked around the tree line, spotting a deer that spotted them before it made a beeline away. Trisha shook her head at having to remind him and happily re-explained the situation. Well, I'm feeling a bit restless around the camp, and outside of carving wooden clubs and stone-tipped arrows, spears, and wooden shields, I'm eager to get a forge going. I'm missing the heat, and we'll need a bunch of tools and supplies that we can't just trade or buy, considering our circumstances. All that to say that I want to check out the mountain caves to see if there are any ores that we can mine sometime soon. She explained in a somewhat long-winded way. Isak just nodding along at this point, having been listening for the mere relief of there being some dialogue to combat the silence. And what are we going to do about the light source? He asked, only just now realizing that going into a cave probably meant little to no light, and he forgot to pack a torch. Trisha couldn't help but snort with amusement at his apparent realization before gesturing to her hip. Hanging off of it was a torch with a strap, as well as a club with a strap of cloth binding around the grip. I've got us covered, Mr. Guard, she teased lightly as they reached the mountain base. Glancing from side to side, she began to walk along until she hopefully found the entrance that she was looking for. I'm surprised you're not carrying one. Aren't guardsmen trained to carry a torch with them for the sheer utility of it? She asked with a genuine curiosity. Isak huffed with a mild annoyance before shrugged a bit, and it's not like he even had any armor to speak of. Well, I didn't realize we were going to be cave diving. Torches were meant to be used by night guards, which wasn't a duty I was assigned to too often due to still being a trainee, he mentioned, as the mainly just followed her trail, still surveying their surroundings, as if by being hyper-vigilant now, he can make up for this morning. Fair enough. Would you like to hold it? She offered with a bit of a grin, having untied it from her belt and held it out to him. He rolled his eyes but took it, though even as he strapped it to his sword belt, he realized he didn't have the means to light it. After deciding against inviting further teasing, he opted not to say anything about it. So, how'd you end up in the back of the cart? Trisha asked, sounding rather sheepish as the grass and gravel crunched beneath her feet. Isak was pretty surprised that she brought that up and averted his gaze as he decided to gather his thoughts. I picked up a shift of another guard. I was trying to earn some extra coin. I wanted to buy a bit of a gift for Miriam. That part of the story doesn't matter, he said, shaking his head a bit before looking forward again. Well, the other guard and I had similar builds, and the helmets covered our entire face for the most part. That is to say, the guard whose patrol I picked up got tapped to report in for a raid of some kind. I was all gung-ho and eager for it too. Finally, I thought, a chance to prove myself as a trainee, and show my worth. He sighed, his shoulders sagging as he rubbed the back of his head again. To say it didn't go like I expected is putting it extremely lightly. The next thing I knew, a team of 6 of our guards was in the middle of the slums, approaching a Peacekin quarter right in the middle of the evening. The team leader bashed the brittle door down so easily, and that's when I saw Miriam. She was just there preparing for a coming-of-age dress for one of the girls in that household. The next thing I knew, she was being slammed down into the ground along with the Donkin family. Hoods were thrown over their heads and chains slapped to their wrists as the others began dragging them off. I tried to stop it, of course. I asked what they did wrong or what the charges were. But the others just looked at me oddly. Even with the helmets, I could tell that they were confused by my reaction. That's when the team leader approached and ripped off my helmet, and upon meeting my gaze, he seemed to understand what may have happened. At this point, Tricia stopped walking, having spotted what looked like a cave entrance not too far ahead. However, she wanted to hear his story without interruptions. Isak had also stopped walking and adopted a faraway look as he remembered what had happened so vividly. The team leader tossed the helmet over to someone else, and when I went to look to see who caught it, I received what I think was a metal elbow to my jaw. When I woke up, I was in underclothes and chained up with you and everyone else in the holding cells. Tricia nods in understanding. The end of the story was somewhat similar to everyone else's at the camp. I see, was all she could manage as they walked up to the cave entrance and peered inside. He looked inside the cave before he offered the torch back to her with a vague embarrassment. I can't light it. At that, despite the heavy mood that came over between them, she couldn't help but chuckle at his expense. Don't worry, I've got it, she said gently, holding her hand out at the end of the torch. After a moment of focus, she spoke out the words of power for focusing her magic. Candlelight, she declares with a gentle familiarity. The end of the torch caught light as she pulled away, still holding the tiny flame in her palm. Now we've got 2 light sources, she mused, smiling some more at Isak's pleasantly surprised expression. Continuing forward with the light, she began looking around the cave entrance before stepping further in. Looks like this isn't just some shallow cave. It opens up further ahead. Isak nodded intently, but before she got too far ahead, he moved forward and outpaced her when he glanced back and offered a half smile. At least let me do my job and escort you in here. I'll walk in front. With that, he continued along ahead of her, though, as they walked, he glanced back to her again. How'd you end up in all of this? She should have figured that he would have asked her in return after she pried into his business. Well, I'm sorry to say that my story isn't nearly as dramatic or interesting as yours, she said bashfully before clearing her throat. Well, it'll be something to fill the silence at least, he countered with a smirk, glancing back at her before focusing on the natural cave tunnel before them. Well, she started to say before sighing a bit. Just over a year ago, my father died of an illness, despite us spending most all the coin we had. Whatever malady had grabbed a hold of him would not be cured by any of the medicines the church could offer. So, when he passed, I inherited the forge. She explains with a small amount of emotional detachment. She had already grieved and processed this. She also knew her father would probably give her a hard time if he knew she grieved for as long as she did. Well, with his passing, the notoriety of his name could only carry me so far, and soon enough, the only ones who would visit the forge would be the local butchers and chefs needing their blades sharpened or their cookware reshaped. To say it wasn't enough was an understatement. I stubbornly clung onto my father's forge, even going so far as to take several loans to keep up the food supplies and taxes, she says in a distant voice as she recalls her stresses and troubles. Stopping and holding the flame in palm closer to the stone wall, she scratches her fingernail against it for a moment and frowned, unsatisfied with what she saw. She kept walking. As anyone would have guessed, some tax collectors came. Eventually, after stopping them at the door a few times, they broke into the smithy in the dead of night and carried me off before I could properly resist. And soon enough, I found myself in the same holding cells as you. Isak nodded solemnly at that. I'm sorry for your loss, he offered, unsure what else to say to all that in the end. Tricia offers just a simple hum of acknowledgement as she traces her fingers along the natural ridges of the stone. Isak was now about to say something else when he heard the clattering of stone further ahead in a much more open cavern along the trail of the cave path. Hold up. Did you hear that? End of chapter. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Casper Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrekahl, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon W.R.E, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.